I've been married to Lisa for 7 years, and for the most part things seemed fine. We had a cozy little life in our suburb of Denver. A nice house, a decent job as a project manager at a tech firm, and a dog named Max who was basically our kid. But looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment things began to unravel. It started with little changes in Lisa's behavior. She began staying late at work more often, claiming it was due to a new project. I noticed her spending more time on her phone, and whenever I tried to engage her in conversation, she'd breeze through my questions with vague answers. At first, I chalked it up to stress or maybe just the mundane nature of married life. But then, I caught a few glimpses of something deeper. I'd come home from work to find her overly dressed for a casual evening, or she'd cancel our plans at the last minute, saying she had a sudden meeting. Eventually, I noticed her texting more frequently, often with a particular smile creeping onto her face that I hadn't seen in a while. It was infuriating and honestly confusing. I felt like something was off, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, we'd built a life together, and I loved her deeply despite the cracks beginning to show. Things escalated the day I found a receipt tucked away in the pocket of Lisa's jacket. It was from a fancy restaurant downtown, the kind of place we went to for anniversaries, and it was dated the night before. I stood there staring at the receipt, my heart racing as I felt the bile rise in my throat. I mustered the courage to confront her, wanting to hear her side before assuming the worst. That night I asked Lisa about it, trying to keep my tone calm, but I could feel my stomach churning. "Hey, I found this in your jacket," I said, holding it out like it was a grenade. "Dinner at Le Gourmet, you didn't mention going out." Her reaction was swift. She rolled her eyes and scoffed. "Oh, come on, Greg. It was just a work dinner with some clients." "You know how it goes," she lied, but the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth gave her away. "Really? Because it looks like it was just you there," I shot back, my voice tightening. "Is there something you want to tell me?" She paused, and for a brief second I thought I'd caught her off guard, but in the next breath she brushed me off. "You're being ridiculous. It's not like I should report every little thing to you. You're just overthinking." Overthinking, I wanted to scream. It felt like a slap in the face. The conversation spiraled quickly, and it was clear she wasn't going to own up to anything. I felt the anger bubbling up, but I didn't want to make a scene, not yet. The discovery detonated something in me, and I spent the next few days in a haze of anger and confusion. I needed proof. I started digging into her activities, checking phone records and social media. I felt like a detective in a bad thriller, and it sickened me that I had to resort to this. One evening, while Lisa was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. I felt like a complete jerk, but I needed to know. I opened her text messages and saw the name that made my blood run. Cold Tom, my coworker. The texts were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and emojis I knew I never received. My heart sank deeper as I read messages about meeting up and how much fun they had that night at that restaurant. I felt dizzy, my hands shaking as I put her phone down. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I had trusted her, and this was how she repaid me. I needed to confront her, but first I had to think. What the hell was I going to do? I was beyond angry. I was devastated. It felt like my world was crumbling, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. As I stared at the wall, my mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. I could confront her with the evidence, but I needed to think this through. If she was cheating, it wasn't just with anyone. It was with Tom, the guy I worked alongside every day. The guy I had shared lunches with and joked about office politics. No way was I going to let this slide. I needed a plan, and it needed to be calculated. It was time to take action. Little did Lisa know I was about to turn this situation upside down. I'd make sure Tom would regret ever thinking he could come between us. The stage was set for revenge, and I was ready to play my part. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for me. I was angry, heartbroken, and absolutely consumed with thoughts of revenge. I couldn't believe that Lisa had betrayed me with someone I trusted. Each time I saw her at home, I put on a brave face, but inside I was plotting. I knew I had to keep a cool demeanor while I gathered the evidence I needed to execute my plan. I started by doing some research on Tom. I had always known he was a decent worker, but I needed to dig deeper. I found out that he had been at the company for about 5 years, and while he was known for his charm, he was also a bit of a player. I recalled the stories I'd heard about him hooking up with other women at the office, but I'd never thought he'd be the type to go after my wife. It felt like a personal betrayal, one guy to another. Feeling increasingly justified in my quest for revenge, I decided to talk to a few mutual friends at work, casually dropping hints about Tom's reputation. I learned that he had a history of inappropriate behavior towards female coworkers. This was the ammunition I needed. I could use this to my advantage. One evening, after Lisa had gone to bed, I stayed up late preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. I gathered screenshots of the flirty messages between Lisa and Tom, saving them on my laptop like trophies. I didn't care if it made me look like a stalker. I was preparing to defend myself. I even printed out some of the messages to have them on hand for when I confronted her again. I knew I needed to be ready for any excuses she had prepared. The next day, I set my plan in motion. I approached a couple of trusted colleagues, telling them I had heard whispers about Tom's behavior. I carefully leaked information about Lisa's affair, making it clear that I was upset but still gathering proof. It didn't take long for the gossip to spread like wildfire around the office. Tom was known to be the charming type, quick to flirt and even quicker to be in someone's bed. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly the office would turn against him once they found out about his involvement with Lisa. With the stage set, I had to confront Lisa again. I waited until the weekend when we had some time to ourselves. I could feel the tension building between us, and it only fueled my determination. I couldn't let her off easy this time. I had to let her know that I knew everything. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said, trying to maintain a calm voice despite my racing heart. "About what?" she asked, fiddling with her hair, knowing full well that she was walking on thin ice. "About you and Tom," I replied, cutting straight to the chase. Her face went pale, but she quickly masked it with a look of annoyance. "What about Tom? He's just a coworker, Greg. You're being paranoid again." I pulled out the printed messages and handed them to her. "These tell a different story. Why don't you explain this?" Her eyes widened as she scanned the texts. I could see the panic rising within her. "This is nothing, you're taking it out of context," she exclaimed, but her voice lacked conviction. "Out of context? You're texting him about meeting up and you're calling him babe. How is that out of context? Just admit it, Lisa, you're cheating on me." I could see her mentally scrambling for excuses. "It was just harmless flirting. I didn't mean anything by it. You know I love you." The words tumbled from her mouth, but they felt hollow. "Love? Is that what you call this? You're sleeping with my coworker and you call it love? Come on, Lisa, be real." I pressed, feeling anger surge through me. She tried to backtrack, claiming it was just some emotional connection, that I was to blame for her looking for comfort elsewhere. "You're always busy with work. I felt neglected," she cried. But I couldn't let her shift the blame. I wouldn't allow her to manipulate me like that. As I stood there staring into her eyes, I felt a flood of emotions hitting me. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. Everything I had bottled up for days. I finally saw Lisa for who she truly was in that moment. A woman who would rather hide behind excuses than face the consequences of her actions. I took a deep breath and decided to let go of the emotional weight. "This isn't just about you anymore, Lisa. You've crossed a line and I won't let this slide." That night was tense. We barely spoke and I could feel the chill in the air. I spent hours thinking about what to do next. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was stronger. I was going to take control of the situation, and I wanted to make sure that Tom would pay for stepping into my life uninvited. As Sunday rolled around, I put the finishing touches on my plan. I decided I would go straight to our HR department and present the evidence. I wasn't going to let Tom's charm shield him from the consequences of his actions. I was ready to expose everything, and I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in days. Tomorrow would change everything. Lisa would have to face the truth, and Tom, he was about to learn that actions have consequences. The following morning I woke up with a mix of adrenaline and anxiety coursing through me. I had a plan to execute, and I was determined to see it through. As I got ready for work, I replayed the confrontation with Lisa in my mind. her desperate attempts to downplay her infidelity echoing in my ears. It was time for me to take back control of my life. By the time I arrived at the office, I was ready to put my plan into action. I had already arranged to meet with Lisa's boss, Karen, who I knew was unaware of the affair. I thought it might be best to have a casual chat first to gauge her reaction before I laid all the evidence on the table. Karen was a no-nonsense type of person, and I figured she'd appreciate the gravity of the situation once I explained it to her. After a morning filled with tension and unease, I finally found a moment alone with Karen. I approached her in the break room, my heart racing. "Hey, Karen, do you have a minute to talk?" "Sure, Greg, what's up?" she replied, looking a bit puzzled at my somber expression. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. "It's about Lisa and Tom. I think you need to know some things." Karen's brow furrowed and she motioned for me to continue. I went on to explain the context of their relationship, carefully detailing the timeline of events and how I discovered the affair. As I spoke, I watched her face shift from confusion to concern. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her tone serious. "I have proof," I replied, pulling out the printed messages and showing them to her. I could see the lines on her forehead deepen as she skimmed through the messages. This is serious," she said, her voice lowered. "I had no idea. I'll need to take this to HR immediately." I nodded, feeling a surge of satisfaction. I had taken the first step in dismantling their little affair. "Thank you, Karen. I just wanted to make sure this doesn't go unchecked." As the day progressed, I felt like a weight was slowly lifting off my shoulders. I was still reeling from the betrayal, but I felt empowered by my actions. I could only imagine how Tom would react once he found out that the walls were closing in on him, and I relished the thought. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Corinne asking me to come to her office. My heart raced as I made my way down the hallway. I knocked on her door and she beckoned me in, her expression serious. "Greg, I spoke with HR, and they are taking this very seriously. They're going to call Tom in for a meeting to discuss the allegations," she said. "I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. We don't tolerate this kind of behavior in the workplace." "Thank you, Karen," I said, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. "I just want to make sure that no one else gets hurt by this." "Of course, I'll keep you updated on what happens. You did the right thing," she assured me. As I left her office, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had done what I set out to do. I was ready to watch Tom's world come crashing down. But I also knew this wouldn't fully resolve my issues with Lisa. I still had to confront her again once all of this came to light. The next day, I received a call from Corinne. "Greg, you should probably come to HR. Tom has been brought in for a meeting regarding the allegations." I felt a thrill of excitement as I made my way to the HR department. I wanted to be there when Tom faced the consequences of his actions. When I arrived, I was escorted into the conference room where Tom sat, looking uncharacteristically nervous. His usual cocky demeanor was replaced with unease, which brought me a certain sense of satisfaction. "Hey man," Tom said, attempting to act casual, but I could see the tension in his posture. "What's going on?" I narrowed my eyes at him, refusing to engage in small talk. The HR representative, a stern-looking woman named Linda, entered the room and promptly began the meeting. "Thank you for coming, Tom," she said, her voice steady. "We need to discuss some serious allegations that have been brought to our attention regarding your conduct with Lisa." I watched as Tom's face drained of color. "What allegations?" he stammered, trying to maintain his composure. "Allegations of inappropriate conduct and harassment," Linda stated bluntly. "We have received evidence suggesting that you've been engaging in an extramarital affair with Lisa while also creating a hostile work environment for her." I could feel a rush of satisfaction at seeing him squirm. He tried to deny it, but I could see he was fighting a losing battle. The evidence was undeniable, and it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled for him. As the meeting continued, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, vindication, and even a hint of sadness for what my life with Lisa had become. I thought about how easy it had been for her to throw away our marriage for a brief fling, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. After the meeting, I walked out of HR, feeling as if a chapter in my life was finally closing. But I still had one last confrontation to face: Lisa. I knew I had to prepare for the fallout once she learned that Tom was likely going to be fired. I could only imagine how she would react, and I steeled myself for what was sure to be an explosive confrontation. As my thoughts raced, I realized I was still holding onto a great deal of hurt. While I had taken steps to expose Tom, I had to confront Lisa about her actions, and I was determined to do it on my terms. The walls were closing in, and I was ready to see who would crumble first. The days that followed were a blur of anticipation and dread. I felt like I was living in a movie where everything was unfolding at breakneck speed. Tom's fate was sealed, and word had already spread through the office about his impending termination. I could almost hear the whispers behind my back, the sympathetic glances from coworkers who had no idea what was really happening between Lisa and me. I spent my evenings preparing for the confrontation that awaited me. I went over every detail in my mind, replaying the evidence, rehearsing my words, and anticipating Lisa's responses. I knew that when I finally confronted her again, it would be the moment of truth. I had to stand firm and not let her emotional manipulation sway me. Then came the day I had been waiting for. I received a text from Corinne letting me know that Tom had been let go. "Just wanted to keep you in the loop. He's officially out," she wrote. My heart raced at the thought. I knew this would hit Lisa hard, and I was ready for it. That evening I arrived home, preparing for the storm. Lisa was already there, and I could see the anxiety etched on her face. She was pacing back and forth, her phone glued to her hand. It was clear that she had heard the news about Tom's firing. "Greg, can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaky but laced with urgency. "Sure, but I think you already know what we need to talk about," I replied, crossing my arms. "Please just hear me out," she pleaded, her eyes wide with desperation. "I'm sorry, I really am. I never meant for it to go this far." "Then why did you do it? You had everything," I shot back, my voice rising in frustration. "A good marriage, a life together. And you just threw it all away for a fling with Tom. You have no idea how much this has hurt me. I've seen the messages, Lisa. You were calling him babe and talking about dates. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation." Her expression shifted, and I could see the gears turning in her head as she scrambled for an explanation. "I was feeling lonely. You were always working late, and I just needed someone who understood me," she said, desperation spilling from her lips. "Lonely? Is that really your excuse? You made a choice, Lisa. You chose to betray me with someone I considered a friend." I barked, feeling the anger boiling over. "I didn't think it would mean anything. I thought it was just fun, just a distraction." She stammered, her voice faltering. "But now it means everything, doesn't it? You've lost everything because of your foolish actions," I replied, the weight of the situation hitting me hard. I expected her to break down, to plead and beg for my forgiveness, but instead she stood her ground. "I can't believe you're treating me like this. I'm still your wife, Greg. You can't just toss me aside because I made a mistake." I couldn't believe her audacity. A mistake? This wasn't just a mistake, Lisa. This was deliberate. You made the choice to cheat. You made the choice to betray me. And now you're acting like I'm the villain in this story. The tension in the room escalated. I could see the realization dawning on her, the weight of her actions finally crashing down on her. "What are you planning to do?" she asked, her voice wavering. I took a breath, gathering my thoughts. "I'm going to move forward without you," I said, my heart heavy but resolute. "I can't be married to someone who doesn't value our commitment. You've shown me that you can't be trusted." Lisa stepped back, tears streaming down her face. "You can't mean that. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through our issues." But I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. "I don't think I can. You've shattered my trust, and I don't know if I can ever rebuild that." Her sobs filled the room as she fell to her knees, the reality of the situation sinking in. It was heart-wrenching to see her like this, but I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. "Greg, please," she begged, her voice raw. "I never wanted to hurt you. I know I messed up, but I love you. I wish I could believe that, but love doesn't betray. Love doesn't run to someone else when things get tough," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil roiling inside me. I grabbed my coat and walked toward the door. "I need time to think, Lisa. I don't know where we go from here, but I can't stay in this house right now." "Greg, please don't go." She cried, her voice cracking, but I had made up my mind. I stepped out into the cool night air, closing the door behind me with a heavy heart. As I drove aimlessly through the streets, I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness wash over me. I had lost my wife, my trust, and the life we had built together, but buried beneath the sadness was a flicker of hope. I was taking control of my life again. I was making decisions that felt right for me, no matter how painful they were. That night I booked a hotel room. I needed space, to think and to breathe. And as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank television screen, I realized that while this chapter of my life was closing, another was about to begin. I felt scared and uncertain, but I also felt empowered. I was finally taking steps to reclaim my life, and it felt strangely liberating. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it. I would learn from this experience and I would grow stronger. My heart ached for the memories of what was, but I couldn't let them hold me back any longer. It was time to start anew. The following days turned into a blur of emotions and decisions. I had moved into the hotel temporarily, giving myself the space I needed to think. Lisa was calling and texting nonstop, but I was determined not to respond. I knew that any communication with her would only lead me back into the emotional turmoil I was trying to escape. I spent my days at work, trying to focus amid the chaos. My colleagues were supportive yet shocked by the news of my marriage falling apart. I could feel their eyes on me, full of pity, but I played it cool. I kept my head down, focusing on my projects and avoiding any discussions about my personal life. However, Corinne made a point to check in on me regularly, reminding me that I had a support system if I needed it. One evening after work, I ran into a friend from college, Alex, at a bar. I hadn't seen him in years, and when he noticed my somber demeanor, he pulled me aside. "Hey man, what's going on? You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," he said, genuine concern written all over his face. I didn't want to get into the details, but I felt the need to share a bit of my story. "I'm going through a rough patch. Just found out my wife was cheating on me with a coworker," I admitted, keeping my voice low to avoid drawing attention. "What? I'm so sorry to hear that. You deserve better," he said, putting a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Want to grab a drink and talk about it?" As the drinks flowed, I found myself opening up more than I had intended. It felt good to talk to someone outside of my immediate circle, someone who could give me a fresh perspective. Alex shared his own experiences with relationships, heartbreak, and moving on. It was refreshing, and I realized I wasn't alone in this struggle. By the time the night ended, I felt lighter. I knew I needed to focus on myself and start healing. I had to come to terms with what had happened and find a way to move forward. I decided it was time to start thinking about my next steps, not just for my personal life, but also for my career. With that newfound clarity, I made a plan to revisit my professional goals. I had been so consumed by my marriage that I had neglected my own aspirations. I began looking into opportunities for growth and considering a potential promotion that had been on the table for a while. I felt motivated to channel my energy into something productive instead of dwelling on the past. Meanwhile, I was still receiving messages from Lisa. Each one was a mix of apologies, anger, and desperation. She pleaded with me to come home, promising that we could work through our issues together, but I was resolute in my decision. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't let her manipulative words pull me back in. One evening, I decided to respond to one of her last texts just to clarify where I stood. "I don't think we can fix this, Lisa. You chose to betray my trust, and I can't overlook that. I need time to figure things out," I typed, my fingers trembling as I hit send. Within moments, my phone buzzed again. "You can't just throw everything away. We had a life together," she wrote back, her frustration evident. "I didn't throw it away. You did," I replied, feeling a mix of anger and sadness wash over me. That was the last interaction I had with her for a while. I felt a sense of peace in finally standing my ground, but I also knew that the hardest part was yet to come. I needed to finalize the separation officially, but I wanted to do it in a way that was respectful, at least as respectful as it could be under the circumstances. After a week of living in the Hotel, I decided to gather my things and head back to the house. I knew I needed to have one final conversation with Lisa. I didn't want to drag this out any longer, and I was ready to face whatever fallout awaited me. When I walked through the door, the atmosphere was heavy, filled with unspoken tension. Lisa was sitting on the couch, her face pale as she recognized my presence. "Greg," she whispered, apprehension in her voice. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "We need to talk about what happens next," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know I messed up. Please, can we just talk this through?" "I don't think talking is going to help anymore. I've made my decision," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment. "I think it's best we separate. I can't continue living in a situation where trust is broken. We both deserve to find happiness, even if it's apart." The words hung heavily in the air, and I could see her processing it. "So you're just going to throw everything away, just like that?" "I'm not throwing anything away, Lisa. You made choices that put us here. I can't pretend that everything is okay when it's not," I said, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. She began to cry, and I felt a pang in my heart, but I knew I had to stay strong. "I wish things were different," I said, almost as an afterthought. "But I can't stay in this marriage. I need to focus on myself and my future." After a long silence, she finally nodded, defeated. "I understand. I never thought it would come to this," she whispered. "I know," I replied, feeling the weight of both our hearts breaking in that moment. "But now we have to face the reality of what we've lost." We spent the next hour discussing logistics, dividing our assets, figuring out the next steps for our lives. It felt surreal, barely sinking in that our marriage was truly over. When I left the house that day, I felt a mixture of relief and grief. I had taken control of my life, but it came with a heavy heart. I knew it would take time to heal, but I was ready to start anew. I had faced the betrayal, confronted the pain, and made the decision to move forward. And while the future was uncertain, I felt a flicker of hope. I was ready to rebuild. I was ready to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I turned the page, ready to write a new chapter in my life. The weeks that followed were a mix of healing and rediscovery. After officially separating from Lisa, I moved into a small apartment closer to work. It felt strange at first, living alone again, but the solitude provided me with the space I desperately needed to reflect. I decorated the place with just the essentials: a bed, a couch, and a small dining table. The simplicity was refreshing, and I found comfort in creating a space that was entirely my own. Work became a sanctuary for me. After the uproar surrounding Tom's departure, my colleagues were supportive. They offered words of encouragement, and I felt a renewed sense of camaraderie in the office. I even received a few promotions and opportunities to lead projects that I had been eyeing for a while. Throwing myself into my work was therapeutic. It allowed me to focus on something positive rather than dwelling on the past. But I also knew I had to confront my emotional scars. I started seeing a therapist to help me process my feelings about the betrayal and the end of my marriage. In those sessions, I talked about the hurt, the anger, and the confusion. My therapist guided me through exercises that helped me understand that Lisa's choices were not a reflection of my worth. I learned to focus on self-care and rediscover my interests outside of the relationship. I took up running, something I had always wanted to try but never found the time for during my marriage. I started going on early morning runs, feeling the cold air against my skin as I pushed myself to go farther each day. It became a form of meditation for me, a way to clear my mind and focus on my goals. I signed up for a local 5K, my first race ever, and the anticipation of crossing that finish line became a new source of motivation. As the months went by, I slowly started to feel like myself again. I began socializing more, reconnecting with old friends, and even making new ones. I found myself laughing again, truly laughing, not just a polite chuckle, but deep belly laughs that felt foreign after all the heartache. I learned to enjoy life again, to savor the little moments without the shadow of betrayal hovering over me. One day, as I stood at the finish line of the 5K, I felt a sense of triumph wash over me. I had crossed the finish line, not just for the race, but for my life. I realized how far I had come since the day I learned about Lisa's affair. Yes, it had felt like the end of my world, but it was also the beginning of something new, a chance to redefine who I was and what I wanted from life. I also took the time to reflect on my relationship with Lisa. While it ended in pain, I recognized that it had also taught me valuable lessons about trust, self-worth, and the importance of communication. It was difficult to let go of the memories, but I knew I had to do it for my own happiness. Eventually, I reached a point where I could think of Lisa without bitterness. I realized that I had loved her, and despite everything that had happened, I wanted her to find happiness too. I hoped she would learn from this experience just as I had. I even considered reaching out to her one day, not to reconcile, but to wish her well and close that chapter of my life with grace. Then, one evening, as I was enjoying a quiet dinner at my favorite restaurant, I noticed someone across the room. It was Lisa. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I felt that familiar pang of nostalgia, but instead of anger or sadness, I felt peace. We were both moving on with our lives, and I could see it in her demeanor. She looked different, more mature, perhaps more grounded. As she turned back to her table, I realized that I was ready to let go completely. I didn't need to confront her or revisit our past. I had made my peace with what had happened, and it felt liberating. With the future stretched out before me, I began to think about what I wanted next. I had dreams that had long been buried under the weight of my marriage, and now they were surfacing. I considered travel, pursuing new hobbies, and even dating again when I felt ready. I no longer feared the possibility of heartbreak. Instead, I welcomed the idea of opening my heart to new experiences. I learned that life could be unpredictable and challenging, but it could also lead to growth and unexpected joys. I had emerged from the ashes of my old life, ready to embrace whatever came next. The experience had shaped me, but it did not define me. I was learning to live for myself, and I was excited about the journey ahead. As I walked home that evening, I looked up at the stars shining brightly overhead, feeling a sense of hope and gratitude. I had faced my demons, carved out a new path, and I was finally at peace with myself. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready to take it on, one step at a time.